I need you to be focused. Where is this girl? Where is she? You know, we used to outsource this kind of thing. Where is she? You either give me what I need or this switch will stay on until they turn the power off for lack of payment on the bill. Where is my daughter?
She was virgin, lot of money.
You sold my daughter. You sold her. To who?
I don't know. Please! I don't know! No! Please! Please!
I believe you, but it's not gonna save you.
Brian Mills arranges to meet his 17-year-old daughter Kim, hoping to surprise her with good news. But the reunion collapses before it can even become one. Kim shows up with his ex-wife Lenore, and within seconds, Brian realizes this was never about reconnecting. Kim needs his signature on travel consent forms so she can fly to Paris with her friend Amanda. Since she's still underage, both parents have to approve before she can leave the country. Brian tries to hide the disappointment, but the concern comes out anyway. Two teenage girls traveling across Europe is super dangerous, even with her friends' cousins joining them. After years in government service, Brian doesn't see the world the way Kim does. To him, danger isn't some dramatic movie idea. It's real, organized, and usually waiting for people who think they're safe.
Please.
I don't think a 17-year-old should be traveling alone.
I'm not going to be alone.
Two 17-year-olds.
Amanda's 19.
Brian even offers a compromise, suggesting he travel with them and stay out of sight. But Lenore kills that idea immediately. She throws his own skill set back in his face, reminding him that staying hidden is exactly what made him absent from Kim's life for years. Kim breaks down, and Brian tries to salvage the moment with the surprise he brought for her. But she refuses it before he can even land the gesture and storms out. Lenore tells him this is exactly why Kim keeps her distance, because every time Brian tries to protect her, it feels like control. The words sting, but Brian finally chooses Kim's happiness over his own fear. So, the next morning, he shows up at their house and agrees to sign the form, but not without conditions. Kim has to call him the moment she lands in Paris, then every night before she goes to sleep, using the satellite phone he gives her. He also insists on driving her to the airport himself. Kim happily agrees, relieved that he finally said yes, and rushes off to tell Amanda. But the second she's gone, Lenore criticizes Brian for not agreeing sooner. Brian fires back that all of this would have been easier if she hadn't ambushed him with it at the restaurant, then walks off before the argument can go anywhere. On the day of the flight, Brian drives Kim to the airport, slipping right back into old habits as he gives her a full safety briefing on what places to avoid and how to stay alert. Kim lightly teases him, saying her mother thinks he's paranoid because of his old government job. She admits she always wanted to ask what he really did, but never did because she was afraid she might not like the answer. Brian simply tells her he was a preventer, someone who prevented bad things from happening.
You're really like a spy, right? What happens if I push this button?
Don't touch that button. I was a preventer.
A preventer.
Yeah,
What did you prevent?
bad things from happening.
It was a good job, he says, even if it came with a heavy price. At the airport, Kim runs ahead to meet Amanda while Brian handles her luggage. But his instincts flare when he spots a travel map among Kim's things, marked with destinations across Europe. Before he can fully process it, Lenore arrives at that moment and Brian confronts her. Kim lied. They're not going to Paris for museums, they're planning to follow a rock band across Europe. What hits harder is realizing Lenore knew more than she admitted. Brian is furious that he was kept in the dark, warning her that she's never seen the world the way he has. Lenore fires back with years of resentment, reminding him that she never got to explore the world either because she spent 5 years waiting for his calls. Terrified, each one might be the last. Then she gives him a clear warning: let Kim live. Brian swallows his fear, takes one final photo of his daughter, and lets her board the plane. Shortly after landing in Paris, Kim and Amanda meet a friendly young man named Peter outside the airport. He offers to help them take photos, then smoothly works the conversation toward where they're from and where they're staying. Amanda casually tells him they're from California, and Peter uses the opening to suggest they share a taxi since cabs are expensive. The girls agree, completely unaware that they've just handed a stranger the perfect chance to follow them straight to their door. Back home, Brian studies the photo Kim emailed him and checks the airport log, confirming she landed safely. Meanwhile, Peter drops the girls at their apartment and compliments the place. Amanda eagerly explains that it belongs to her cousin, but the cousin has already left for Spain, meaning they have the whole apartment to themselves. Before leaving, Peter invites them to a school party later that night. Amanda instantly agrees, while Kim hesitates, because they barely know him. Amanda is more focused on how attractive he is. Peter offers to pick them up at 9 and casually asks for their apartment number. Amanda gives it to him without thinking. The moment he walks away, the friendly act disappears, and he makes a discreet phone call, reporting Kim and Amanda's location and personal details. Inside, Kim worries because she told her dad they would be staying with Amanda's cousins. Amanda brushes it off like it makes no difference, already more interested in Peter and whether he might have a friend for Kim.
I'm gonna sleep with him. Who? Peter!
You just met him.
I hear French guys are amazing in bed. Maybe he has a friend, huh?
No.
Oh, come on. You gotta lose it sometime. Might as well be in Paris.
Kim isn't interested in playing along. While Amanda blasts music through the apartment, Kim heads to the bathroom, unaware that Brian is already trying to call her. When she doesn't answer, he calls Lenore instead, but she dismisses him and tells him to relax and take a chill pill. Kim eventually notices the missed calls and slips into the bathroom to call her father back. She reassures him that everything is fine, but Brian's instincts still won't settle. He asks to speak to one of Amanda's cousins, forcing Kim to admit the truth. The cousins were already in Spain before the girls arrived. Before Brian can even react, Kim's voice breaks. She sees unfamiliar men entering the apartment. Brian's entire tone changes. The worried father disappears, and the preventer takes over. He asks how many men there are, what they look like, where she is, and what she can see. Kim tells him Amanda is being grabbed in another room, then mentions the guy from the airport named Peter who gave them a ride. Brian connects it instantly. He tells Kim to leave the bathroom, hide under the bed, keep the phone line open, and report everything when the men try to grab her. The intruders enter the room, search briefly, and leave when they don't spot her. For one fragile second, Kim thinks she survived. Then she's dragged out from under the bed. Miles away, Brian can only listen as his daughter is taken. Before the kidnappers disconnect, he gives the man on the other end one chance. He tells him he has a very particular set of skills built over a long career. If they release Kim now, he'll let it end there. But if they don't, he will find them, and he will kill them. The kidnapper just answers with 2 words.
Good luck.
The second the call ends, Brian contacts his former colleague Sam and starts analyzing the recording. Brian then rushes to Lenore's house and tells her and Stuart Little what happened. Lenore collapses in tears, but Brian can't afford to break down with her. He moves through the house, checking every angle and asking whether anyone might want revenge against Stuart, especially after a past Russian deal went bad. Stuart gets offended that Brian ran a background check on him and tries to square up, but Brian has no interest in flooring him. There's no time for ego. He needs Stuart's resources, and he needs them now, because every minute Kim is missing brings her closer to being sold. Not long after, Brian's former colleague calls him with information on the kidnappers. He identified the voice as part of an Albanian trafficking network that targets young female tourists. Sam warns him that girls like Kim are usually drugged, forced into prostitution, and sold within 96 hours. That gives Brian almost no time to find her before she disappears forever. During the flight, Brian plays the kidnapper's voice over and over until every word is burned into his head. By the time he lands in France, panic has already been replaced by strategy. His first stop is the apartment where Kim and Amanda were taken. To avoid attention, he enters the building disguised as a flower delivery man, slips into the main hall, and works his way toward the girls' unit through a quieter route, scaling the exterior and forcing his way in through a neighboring apartment. Inside, the wreckage tells him everything. The apartment is trashed, but Brian doesn't see chaos. He sees a timeline. He reconstructs the abduction from the sounds he heard during Kim's call, matching each noise to the rooms around him. He identifies where Amanda was grabbed, where Kim hid under the bed, and how the kidnappers moved through the place. While searching closer, he finds a shard of broken glass tangled with strands of hair and pockets it as evidence. His next lead comes from Kim's phone. Brian removes the memory card and scrolls through her photos, passing harmless vacation shots until one image stops him cold. The picture Peter took of Kim and Amanda outside the airport. Brian zooms in, studying the reflection behind them, and there he is. Peter's face, faint but clear enough. With one careless reflection, the man who delivered Kim to the traffickers has just become Brian's first real target. The following day, Peter is back at the airport running the same play. A security guard signals that another young woman fits the usual profile, and Peter moves in smoothly, offering to share a ride through the same expensive transport line. But before he can trap another tourist, Brian the Grim Reaper shoves him into the cab, folds him up with a few brutal shots to vital spots, and demands his daughter's location. When the taxi driver tries to pull Brian off him, Brian neutralizes him too. The attack draws police attention, giving Peter just enough room to escape into the crowded streets. Brian steals the taxi and tears after him, refusing to let his only lead vanish. However, Peter soon panics and jumps from an overpass onto a truck below. For 1 second, it looks like he might get away. Unfortunately for him, luck clocks out immediately. Peter dies before Brian can get the answers he needs, forcing him to move to the next possible connection. Jean-Claude, an old acquaintance and senior French intelligence official with deep reach across Paris. Jean-Claude listens to what happened and points Brian toward Porte de Clichy, a criminal hotspot where traffickers and handlers operate in the open. But he also warns Brian not to attract attention or cause trouble.
Brian, you cannot just run around tearing down Paris.
Jean-Claude, I will tear down the Eiffel Tower if I have to. I thought I was talking to a friend.
You are, but please remember, your friend has a desk now.
Deputy Director, Internal Security, very impressive. The Albanians.
They showed up from the east 6-7 years ago.
Where do I find them?
The best place to start is Porte de Clichy. Brian, try not to make a mess.
The warning sounds like advice, but the moment Brian leaves, Jean-Claude makes a quiet call of his own, telling his superior that Brian Mills is in Paris, and he's about to become a serious problem. That night, Brian meets a translator named Gregor outside Porte de Clichy and hires him for 10 hours. Gregor is surprised by the money, but Brian doesn't waste time explaining. He instructs him to wait in the car, then walks toward the girls working the street. One quotes him the standard $40 price, but quickly realizes Brian isn't there for business. When he keeps asking questions, she shuts him down and warns him he's going to get himself in trouble. Right on cue, Hulk appears and slams Brian against the wall, angry that Brian just scared off paying clients and cut into his money. He demands 50 euros, then another 50 because Brian was simply doing too much and sends him away with a threat. Brian takes the humiliation without reacting because Hulk has no idea he just got played. During the scuffle, Brian slipped an audio recorder and tracking device into his jacket. Back in the car, Brian activates the device and has Gregor translate everything being picked up. At first, most of it sounds useless. Insults aimed at Brian, sports talk, and chatter about a construction site. But one phrase cuts through the noise: new merchandise. Given everything Brian already knows, he understands exactly what that means. They're not talking about products. They're talking about girls. After thanking Gregor, Brian follows the tracker to a construction site where men are lining up to enter a small building. He blends in, pays the fee, and steps inside. What he finds confirms his worst fear. The place has been turned into a filthy holding facility, with makeshift rooms filled with young girls who have clearly been drugged and abused. Brian moves through each room, searching for Kim or Amanda, until one detail snaps his focus into place: Kim's jacket. He attacks instantly, dropping the man in the room within seconds, only to realize the girl wearing the jacket isn't Kim. Brian tries to question her, but she's too sedated to speak. Before he can get anything useful, another trafficker walks in and the situation explodes. Brian puts him down before he can fire, then tears through the rest of the building, killing or disabling anyone standing between him and the girl. With armed men closing in, Brian gets the sedated girl into his car and blasts his way out. Gunfire rips around him, but he uses the construction site against them, triggering an explosion to slow the pursuit. One vehicle flips, another crashes into an electric pole, and when a new shooter takes over, Brian swerves just in time to make him lose control and slam into a trailer, only to spot another tail still following. Instead of panicking, Brian lets the man know he's been seen, then slips down a partially covered driveway. Using the concealment, he switches vehicles and disappears before the traffickers can lock onto him again. He then brings the rescued girl to the apartment of a trusted contact, where she can recover safely. With no proper medical setup, Brian improvises with a hanger and administers IV fluids and medication to fight the drugs in her system. But as he watches her breathe, the cost hits him. Saving this girl was the right move, but every minute spent keeping her alive is another minute Kim spends deeper inside the trafficking chain. The next morning, Jean-Claude contacts Brian and requests a meeting, but Brian doesn't walk into anything blind. He studies the area from a nearby rooftop first, spotting the men pretending to jog around the block. When Jean-Claude calls, Brian tells him to let his fake joggers know they're wasting their time. Jean-Claude freezes and asks where he is, but Brian only tells him he can see and hear everything he needs to, and that is all that matters. Jean-Claude claims he has arranged safe passage back to the United States as a favor for Brian's past service. With 7 bodies, 3 hospitals, and a destroyed building now connected to him, French authorities want him gone before this becomes an international disaster. Brian corrects him. It was a trailer van, not a building. While Jean-Claude keeps him talking, agents trace the call and close in on his location, but Brian slips away before they can touch him, proving retirement has not dulled him in the slightest. Later, as Brian studies Albanian phrases that might help him identify the men behind Kim's abduction, the rescued girl finally wakes up. Once he calms her down, he shows her Kim's photo and asks where she got the jacket. The girl explains that she was taken to a red building, where a kind captive gave it to her to keep warm. Brian asks if she remembers anything about the location, and the girl gives him the only clue she has, a sign nearby that said Paradise. That is enough. Brian heads straight there and walks into the building like he belongs, using Jean-Claude's name to get through the door. Claiming he works with Mr. Macon, another one of Jean-Claude's associates, he demands to speak with whoever is in charge. The traffickers mistake him for an official contact and lead him upstairs, where Brian plays the part perfectly, saying Macon has been moved to another branch and he's here to renegotiate their rates. Brian raises the price by 20%, blaming the cost of changing the lens on the satellite supposedly monitoring them. The men buy just enough of the lie for him to push further. Eventually, he asks the real question. Which one of them is Marco from Trapoja? They all claim to be Marco, so Brian stands, acting irritated, and hikes the rates even higher. When one of them challenges him, Brian reminds them he can bury them for drugs or prostitution. Then the room goes quiet. The men exchange looks, and a wad of cash is handed over. Just before leaving, Brian gives one of them a note written in Albanian and asks for a translation. The men laugh as they read it, but one of them smirks and answers with the exact words Brian heard on the kidnapping call.
Good luck.
The second Brian hears it, everything locks into place. He has found the voice. Marco realizes too late that he just exposed himself and reaches for a gun, but Brian drops him in seconds. From there, the room erupts. One by one, the traffickers fall as Brian tears through the building, turning their safe house into a war zone. After clearing the lower floors, Brian searches room after room of kidnapped women, desperate to find Kim. Instead, he finds Amanda, already dead. The discovery hardens whatever restraint he had left. Brian drags Marco into the chair and tortures him using techniques from his intelligence days, pressing him for Kim's location. Marco resists at first, but pain eventually breaks him. He reveals that Kim was sold to a wealthy man named St. Clair, though he doesn't know how to reach him.
Don't keep versions. Sell them. She was virgin. Lot of money.
You sold my daughter. You sold her to who? What?
St. Clair. St. Clair.
St. Clair. St. Clair. Is that a person? A place? Where can I find him?
I don't know. Please! I don't know!
That is still enough to move Brian forward. He turns on the grilling machine, leaves Marco behind to die, and shifts every thought toward finding St. Clair. That evening, he pays Jean-Claude an unexpected visit at home. Jean-Claude is having dinner with his family when Brian appears unannounced. His wife Isabelle politely invites Brian to stay, unaware that the room has just become a trap. Jean-Claude leaves to tuck in his children and quietly retrieves a pistol before returning to the table. He tries to keep things formal, but Brian brings up Macon. Isabelle casually says Macon is a friend of the family, and Brian gets the confirmation he needed. Brian asks Jean-Claude if he's involved in all of this. Jean-Claude doesn't deny the rot around him. He admits he doesn't care what happens under the blinds as long as his salary gets paid and his family is taken care of. Furious, Brian demands St. Clair's location. Jean-Claude then reaches for his gun, only to discover Brian has already removed every bullet. With the power flipped, Brian forces his former friend to cooperate. Jean-Claude gives him St. Clair's photograph, address, and everything he knows about the operation. Once Brian has what he needs, he knocks him unconscious and heads straight for the target. Using an undercover police credential, Brian gets inside an exclusive private gathering where St. Clair is conducting business. He moves through the building quietly, following the operation and removing anyone who might expose him. After crossing paths with a server carrying drinks, Brian soon appears inside the auction room himself, making it clear the server didn't make it far. He takes a position beside a macho-looking bidder and offers him drinks while the man bids on one of the girls.
I have 250, 250, sold for 250,000.
Then, the final item is brought out, and Brian's whole body locks up. It's Kim, broken and terrified, placed in front of rich men-like property. Brian quietly puts the bidder at gunpoint and forces him to keep bidding. When the man refuses to go higher, Brian pushes the button himself until the bid reaches $500,000. The plan works. Kim is bought before anyone else can claim her. But the victory doesn't last. As Brian is let out, he is knocked unconscious. When he wakes up, he is face to face with St. Clair. The trafficker asks who he is, and Brian tells him the last girl is his daughter. He even offers to pay for her, but St. Clair tells him there are no refunds in this business. Every deal is final. Then he orders his men to dispose of Brian quietly. The moment St. Clair leaves, one of the guards tries to strangle him, but Brian breaks free, kills the men assigned to watch him, and fights his way through the building. After carving through St. Clair's security, he corners the trafficker and demands to know where Kim was taken. Terrified, St. Clair gives up the information and tries to renegotiate, but Brian is done listening. For St. Clair, this was business. For Brian, it was always personal. Using the information he forced out of him, Brian chases after Vlad's car and tracks the traffickers to a yacht, preparing to leave with several girls on board, including Kim. He steals a vehicle and launches into another pursuit, weaving through traffic and pushing the car to its limit. By the time the yacht passes beneath a bridge, Brian has already positioned himself above it. He jumps onto the vessel unnoticed and disappears inside. One by one, the guards start vanishing. When the remaining traffickers realize there is an intruder on board, they spread out to hunt him down. Brian turns that hunt against them. He silently eliminates several men before the entire yacht erupts into a gunfight. After burning through his ammunition, he faces the leader's chief bodyguard in a brutal hand-to-hand fight. The man actually makes him work for it, but Brian eventually puts him down and keeps moving. Finally, Brian reaches the yacht's owner, the powerful buyer who now has Kim. The man tries to negotiate for his life, but Brian has no patience left for bargaining. The second the man blinks, Brian fires. Kim is stunned that her father crossed continents, dismantled an entire trafficking network, and fought through everyone in his path just to find her. Brian then pulls her into an emotional embrace, and for the first time since the phone call, the mission is over. They soon return home, where Kim reunites with Lenore and Stuart, both overwhelmed with relief. Stuart asks Brian if he needs anything, but Brian tells him he already has everything he needs as he watches Kim and her mother hold each other. Lenore tearfully thanks him for bringing their daughter home alive, and Stuart offers him a ride, but Brian refuses. Before he leaves, Kim thanks him again, now fully understanding that his fear was never about control. It was about knowing exactly what the world can do. Sometime later, Brian gives her the surprise he never got to deliver properly, a meeting with Shira, the pop singer he once protected during a short bodyguard job. Kim is speechless as Shira personally invites her inside to meet her vocalist and manager, giving Brian one final chance to help his daughter chase a dream instead of saving her from a nightmare.
Hi, looking for a date?
I love your dress. Is that silk?
I don't know. You want to know the prices?
Just the way it falls, how it complements the natural curves of your body.
The rate is 40 euros for the standard.
Standard. Could you be more specific?